Hello and welcome to our brand new program called Women to Women. I am your hostess for the evening. My name is Carol Paz, and we are here because of two very special sponsors. We are here for Carpa Nevada LLC, distributor of fine Portuguese olive oils, balsamic vinegars, and international teas. And we're also here under the sponsorship of Pete Koskarat, owner of Villa Bosque Deli and Cafe here in Carson City, home of Pete's famous chorizo. So we'd like to welcome our guest tonight, Janice Baldwin, who is a very special individual, female, who's making a difference in Northern Nevada. And Janice, I welcome you to our show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Thanks again. Janice, we're going to keep your passion a bit of a secret for a few moments, okay? And I know everyone is going to hang right in there with us because women in general we're not only mothers, wives, caretakers, we're school teachers, we're nurses, we're attorneys, we're physicians, we're a lot of things. We wear many different hats, we have many different roles. And one of the most important is probably where we come from originally, because that's where our value system and a lot of what we grew up with, what makes us who we are as an adult. Are you a local native Nevadan?
I am not.
You are not?
Nope.
Where did you come from?
I was born in Salt Lake City, Utah.
Okay.
But I have to tell you, my three oldest siblings were born in Ely, Nevada.
Okay, so you're a neighbor, but they're the real thing.
There you go.
So you said that there were siblings. How many were there of you? Because quite often that pecking order makes a difference in how you think and feel as well.
Absolutely. And there was 5 of us growing up, but I had a sister that passed away at 5 when I was 3. So we like to call her part of our family, even though we can't remember that much about her.
And there's a value right there of family.
Absolutely.
She's a part of that family still today, in spirit and in memory.
That's right.
Was your mother a stay-at-home mother? Was she a working woman?
My mother was a stay-at-home mother. My other brother was, when he was 7, my sister died at 5, and he was 7, and he got polio also, and was a quadriplegic. So she stayed home and nursed him,
before the Salk vaccine was available.
Exactly, and just interestingly, there's like 4 strains of polio, 4 more strains of polio. So when the vaccine came out, the doctor said it's important for him to get the vaccines, because we don't know which strains he had. So that's just an interesting little thought in there.
But in that growing up period as a young girl, you faced, both personally and as a family, loss, great illness, and great coming together, a support system for your sister and for your brother. So that makes a difference in how you feel today as an adult about your own children and about the environment that you live in.
Exactly.
So when did you come to Nevada?
20 years ago, and that's amazing how fast that's gone.
Through marriage or through enterprise of some sort?
Well, my husband was starved out of Salt Lake with the recession that was in the 1990s and 91.
Yes.
He was a real estate agent, and the real estate market was bad, and he had a degree in sociology, and Nevada at that point was hiring sociology or social workers.
Yes.
So we came to a little town, and for 5 years he was a social worker, and then came here to Carson City to be a computer programmer.
Did you notice, even though we're neighboring states, Utah and Nevada, did you notice differences between the states in the cultures of the states? Because as much as I've traveled, I feel that when I'm in the state of Indiana or I'm in the state of Pennsylvania or New York, it's a different environment. Was Nevada anything that you were expecting?
I have to say, and I'm not trying to be rude about Nevada, because I love Nevada.
I do too.
But it was absolutely a cultural shock.
In what way?
Because number one, where we lived was much greener and just more pride in your yards and in.
You had the water.
Well, they're a semi-arid where this is an arid.
Yes.
So there was that little bit more water, and the going back to Brigham Young and the irrigation and the whole water system, Salt Lake grew into a beautiful city. It used to look just like Nevada at one time, but because of the culture, they made it into a beautiful oasis. And
has Lake Tahoe made any difference in your impression of Nevada?
oh, well, that's where I used to have to get my green fixes. I'd say, oh, gotta go up to Tahoe and get my green fix.
Okay, so when you and your husband came here to Nevada, were you engaged in this passion that you have at that time?
No, not really. I'd say it was always there, and we've always participated in the political process and caring about our country and our government. We've always felt like America was an important contribution to the world, not just to the people in America, but throughout the world. And
so I'm sorry to interrupt just that moment. I'm trying to get this idea. When you came from Nevada, when you came from Utah into Nevada, and you saw changes, did you notice changes that were happening in the country as well? It was not just Nevadans, it was not just individuals from Utah, it was not just yourself. Was the country in a sense of change at that time that you said, you know what, I'm going to enter the system?
I think most of all, it brought an awareness of the change.
And what were some of those changes, if you don't mind?
I think education has deteriorated. And where we were raising our children, education was a very important thing.
Yes.
But when we got here and my son that was quite academic was put down for his academics, it made me start looking at what was happening. And now I see that dumbing down of America,
which is the title of a very well-read book.
yes, is across the country.
It's a national epidemic. And we wonder as mothers, we wonder as women who are responsible for a lot of the homework studies, a lot of the preparations for the tests, a lot of encouragement to our children to research. And we say, while technology has been a tremendous asset, we also have to be careful with how we use that technology. And should it really replace the good old-fashioned reading of a book, going to a library? Well, there are a lot of other assets in the libraries today, just besides books and tapes. So in your own family, how have you dealt with that? Okay, here you said you had a son who was highly academic, and he was more or less made an issue of conversation because of that ability. How did you handle that in your home?
We just gave family support and encouraged the academics.
Still.
We homeschooled for a few years. I'm not a homeschool guru advocate. I just believe that a mother and father need to look at their children and meet the needs of the individual children. And for him, the 4 years that we had him in homeschool, he learned who he was and his values. And when he got put into situations that were stressful, he was strong enough in his own belief that and he knew he could study on his own. He knew he didn't need that teacher to tutor him, to hold his hands. He proceeded in his math and
I think as a former teacher, retired teacher out of New York State, that's the goal of a parent and of a really excellent teacher, is to know that that student is now independent of what you brought to them. You have been the supporter, the provider, the encourager, the editor, so to speak, of their work, and now they're ready for that next year. And that's what you want to see your own child do. You want to see them be able to stand on their own feet because of the educational background they've had and because of the family support. Those are extremely important values. One more value, perhaps, that you wanted to have your children be a part of, so that when they left the nest, when they left the home, when they went off to college or perhaps even another country, what was it besides education that you wanted to take with them?
I wanted them to learn to be independent financially.
Big one.
We have never catered to handing our children money. They never came to us and said, "Mom, can I have money for the movies?" We worked with them from the time they were little. I'd go out and pick up pop cans, and one of the things we did, we'd go to the golf range and pick up golf balls, and my son would stand at the watering fountain and watch the golf balls, and the golfers would come by and go, "Whoa, you've got a lot of golf balls there," that they'd picked up off the range.
Yes.
He'd turn around and sell them to him for $1 a piece or whatever.
To earn his pocket money.
Right. So my children always paid half their way all the way through for everything. And so when they got to be young adults, they were ready to take on a business world.
You know, I can remember going back just very briefly, my own son, when he was growing up in our home, we were in New York, and there were 3 boxes in his bedroom. And one box was for savings, one box was for his faith, his church giving, and the other for spending. But 50% had to go into his savings.
Exactly.
And 10% for sure had to go into his faith savings. And the other 40% he had to decide how he was going to use.
That's what we did too.
Yes, and I think it's a simplified budget system, but it's something that as they grow up, they remember it. It's not always true they're going to follow it. Sometimes they have to walk into great big ruts of financial debt to find out, oh, I should have been doing this. But I agree with you that if we're going to remain a strong country, we need to have strong citizenry. We need to have citizens who are well educated, who do know how to manage a budget. And I think this is going to lead us into that passion that you have. You're here in Nevada. What is the name of the organization that you have so deeply strong feelings for?
Well, we call it PACT, meaning we're a pact of Project Americans coming together. And it was formed out of a need for people to have their needs met as they watched America struggling, as they watched the economics falling apart, as they watched politicians, it was just a struggle. And people were saying, what do I do? What do I do? And we said, what can we give?
So you've created a tool, so to speak, in which they can become involved. Do you think that a tool of this nature, PACT, P-A-C-T, was available in another name or another form, let's say in the 1900s or the 1800s when our country was facing civil war, 1860 to 1865, or when it was facing a depression, 1929 or 1930. How is PACT, P-A-C-T, perhaps different and new?
I would say ours is an educational process.
Explain.
Through history, we've had individuals step up and do what needed to be done. During the Revolutionary War, during the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln, George Washington, they stepped up and they did what needed to be done. And our group is educational on the foundation principles of America.
And where does that foundation come from? In other words, for your group PACT, the foundation of America is laid in what document?
In the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and the Declaration of Independence.
Okay. So PACT is an organization that focuses on what the Constitution actually says. So you have to be informed, you have to have read it, and you also need to realize that the Bill of Rights is a very important document for personal as well as for professional and home life. Do you feel, Janice, that the Constitution and or the Bill of Rights have always been applied across the board to all of us as citizens in a fair and just way? Some people would say, well, they're outdated. It doesn't apply to us anymore. And I'm going to hold that question for you because many of our young people and many of us in our generation have struggled with some of those concepts, and yet we weren't there. We were not walking in the shoes of those delegates in that hot, hot summer of Philadelphia when they struggled to put this together. And they argued. But they argued on the basis that it was not only for them, it was for future generations. So I want to come back to that and ask some of those ideas because our viewing audience needs to also be educated, just as I do, and we need to feel some passion stirring in our hearts again for what's very important for the future of this nation.
Absolutely.
There are some question marks there today. So we'll be right back.
This episode of Women to Women is brought to you by Carpa Nevada LLC and Villa Basque Deli and Cafe.
Are you looking for a healthier lifestyle? A more nutritious diet? Do you care about quality? If your answer is yes, or if you are just curious, come into Villa Basque Deli and Cafe right here in Carson City, Nevada. Discover fine Portuguese extra virgin olive oils, vintage balsamic vinegars, and a wide assortment of international health teas provided by distributor Carpa Nevada LLC. In addition to these terrific items, Villa Basque is also the home of Pete's famous Basque chorizo, handmade on the premises from Pete's secret family recipe. Satisfy your culinary curiosities. Don't delay.
How was school today?
Cool, we learned what to do in case there's an emergency.
Oh, will you show me?
If there is an earthquake, then you get under your desk, duck, cover, and hold. And when the shaking stops,
we evacuate the school just like a fire drill.
I'm glad you both know what to do in case of an emergency, but I'd still be worried.
Check the phone, radio, or TV, and they'll tell you what to do.
Make a plan.
Assemble a kit.
Stay informed.
And be ready.
Welcome back to Women, and again I am Carol Paz, your host for the program. And I have with me Janice Baldwin, who is an integral part of a brand new program called PACT, P-A-C-T, People Coming Together.
Project Americans
Coming Together. Thank you, Janice. And I asked Janice before the break, we have a Constitution, which is the supreme law of the land. We have a Bill of Rights that gives us, like no other nation in the world, freedoms, personal freedoms. And yet we seem to be having trouble sticking to the Constitution, sticking to those Bill of Rights, or there are challenges. And that's normal for people to question. But our founding fathers were indeed a unique group of men who put forth their ideas, their opinions, their challenges, their disagreements in a fairly orderly procedure. And they truly sweated out in that Philadelphia city back in the 1700s what this Constitution should say and what it would mean for this country in future generations. They were not just thinking of themselves. So I'm coming back to Janice with this question. Janice, in terms of PACT, in terms of the work that you do within this organization, you say that you're educating the public. You're helping individuals as well as communities and areas of the country. So besides Carson City, where else is PACT involved?
It's still growing. Reno and Gardnerville, people all, Lyon County, they've all come to our events. They all recognize our group and that when they come they will get good education on government principles.
Now, where do these government principles, do you use materials that are absolutely legitimate and that are well documented?
Yes, we have been using the material from National Center for Constitutional Studies, and those people took the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and the Declaration of Independence and broke it down for easy understanding. And one of the books is the 5,000-Year Leap that gives 28 principles to those documents. And if we lived those 28 principles, we would be a free, prosperous people. And when I say free, I mean individually free and government free. Not free of the government, because the Constitution and those people recognize the need for government.
Yes.
And the balance between the people running their own lives and government regulations.
Okay. And I'm in the process of reading the 5,000-Year Leap, and I'm very appreciative because it's taking me back intellectually and foundationally to the Constitution. And I can see when I read daily newspapers, and I may read 3 or 4 daily newspapers, okay, in the course of a day, and I will say to myself, how did we get so far off track Now, there are those out there who dispute that with me. But I think in general, we have to keep asking ourselves over and over as each generation emerges and becomes a citizen with a right to vote. Do I know my constitutional rights? Do I know the Constitution? Have I read it? Have I ever read it?
Right.
What do you think the answers to those questions might be?
Well, we need to study. And the Constitution is a little hard to understand. It's a little
because of the
legal,
language, right?
And the way it was written,
That's right.
and it's written in a legal form.
And the time period that it was written in.
Right. And so it's not easy to understand. And anytime you condense a lot of information into simple wording, you've got to expound upon it. And that's what it does. And I think a lot of people have not taken the time to study what Congress is supposed to do, what the Senate's supposed to do, what the president is supposed to do. We don't know that the president only has 7 responsibilities, and we allow him to take those responsibilities and go beyond his bounds.
Right, whether we're talking Republicans, Democrats, or independents, whoever holds that coveted office, that very prestigious office, has a tremendous amount of power, but it has also been delegated. How much power and which powers? Because we have 2 other branches of government that are there to check and balance everything. Well, when's the last time that you sat down in a conversation, either with your children, other family members, or friends, and had a really good talk about the Constitution of the United States?
Well, we study the Constitution on a regular basis. I have one group that meets on a monthly basis, and we look at those 28 principles and study them in a little bit more clearer detail. There's other groups throughout the country, or throughout northern Nevada, that meet on a weekly basis and look at the 28 principles from the Constitution and study them.
And you know, probably what you are doing is very unique. We as a nation, I agree with you, need to have conversations informally about principles that we live by, and these principles that are contained in the Constitution. Just as you had guidelines and values that your family passed on to you, we're trying to pass on a legacy to our children of a government that has never had, there has never been any other kind of government equal to this one that has lasted under this form of democracy. So I would like to personally see more of these groups where we take it seriously what our country will look like and be in 10 years, a decade from now. What will our country look like in 25 years? If we don't become involved, if we do not take a look at why it has survived civil war, over 600,000 civilian deaths, more than World War I, World War II, Vietnam, and the Korean War put together. We survived that because of the framework. Then if we're not willing to deal with those principles on a continuing basis, we actually have to ask ourselves, do we have a country called the United States of America in the year 2025?
And the wonderful part is the crossroads. At every one of the crossroads, I'm going to say a miracle happened to bring us back to the intent of the Constitution. During the Civil War, there were miracles that turned the tide. During the Civil War, there were miracles that turned the tide. And throughout our history, there's been miracles of turning the tide to point us back towards the Constitution. And I believe a miracle will happen again here in the near future to turn us back towards the Constitution.
Well, I certainly share your enthusiasm, I share your hopes. But I also, as a teacher, will look at reality and the practicality of the things which I see our citizens reading or not reading. And when I understand that the average reading level is 5th grade for most of our published newspapers, that frightens me.
And yet we have to have hope
Yes.
because there are National Center for Constitutional Studies. They are going throughout the country teaching these principles. Children are being educated, not in the mass numbers that we would like to see, but they are being educated. And maybe 1 in 10 children, young people, young adults, really care about the Constitution and this freedom of the government that we're talking about. And so I'm holding on to hope.
And I'm saying thank you, Janice Baldwin, so much for bringing to our attention and to the northern areas of Nevada what we can still do. And there's a lot that we can do.
Lots.
There's everything to hope for and everything to work toward if we want to call this country ours. And I want it to stay in American hands.
I do too.
And I want to see leadership arise that is very well versed in those books that our founding fathers read and took their ideas from, because they discussed it with energy, with vigor. And for them, it was the most important thing that they leave as a legacy was a country that had a footing, a sound footing, and that they could depend that their children and grandchildren and future generations would not falter. We can challenge, we can ask questions, we can debate, but the framework is the best that's ever been written.
Yes.
So I thank you so much. And we look forward to seeing you next time with our next guest, a woman with a passion who is making a difference in northern Nevada.
Living in the wildland urban interface can be risky. These photos show how Defensible Space saved this home. Visit these websites to learn more about defensible space and wildfire preparedness. Make a plan, assemble a kit, stay informed, and be ready.
Are you looking for a healthier lifestyle? A more nutritious diet? Do you care about quality? If your answer is yes, or if you are just curious, come into Villa Basque Deli and Cafe right here in Carson City, Nevada. Discover fine Portuguese extra virgin olive oils, vintage balsamic vinegars, and a wide assortment of international health teas provided by distributor Carpa Nevada LLC. In addition to these terrific items, Villa Basque is also the home of Pete's famous Basque chorizo, handmade on the premises from Pete's secret family recipe. Satisfy your culinary curiosities. Don't delay.
When you want to adopt a soldier, Marine, Airman, it's not about what you send them. It's about anchoring them to home. It's about anchoring them to the things that they remember and the things that make them feel warm and fuzzy. And I got an email, a letter actually, when I first started this. You asked me when that light bulb went off. I mean, I was doing this and loving it, but when I got, and this was in the beginning, I got this letter, and he said, "Dear PJ, I've been deployed now for 9 months, and every month my buddies get a box, and they share what they have with me. But today I got my own box with my name on it." And he said, "I can't even explain to you. I know it's emotional. Every time I think about this, he said, I can't tell you what it meant to me to get a box of my own." And when that happened, it's an emotional thing. I know, that was my aha moment, because I had the same reaction that you're having right now. It was like, oh my God, this is more. This is more than sending cookies and candy and things like that. These are real people. And a lot of what people don't know is there are a lot of soldiers that aren't supported by their families. And they're virtually alone in their mission and something that they believe in.